Everybody has a story, and every story needs to be heard. On this podcast, we are talking with each member of the General Conference Leadership Council. I'm your host, Alyssa Truman, and this is A&N Profiles. Today, I'm here with Fylvia Kline, who is the manager of VividFaith. Thank you so much for joining us, Fylvia. Did I get your name right?
Absolutely,
Okay.
you did. I know it's a hard one to get around the tongue, but you did well.
It's actually kind of fun to say. I think I could enjoy saying this. Fylvia Kline. So I'm really excited to be able to be here with you today. I don't actually know that much about you. We've met a couple times to talk about VividFaith. Let's talk a little bit about what is VividFaith. What is this project that you're working on?
VividFaith is an online service. It's created by GC Secretariat for the Adventist World Church, and it is a online tool to connect people with mission opportunities. So it's pretty much like any recruiting tool, but the focus is mission opportunities. So if where you serve has a focus on missions, well, you can post that on VividFaith, and somebody out there would answer to the ad and respond. So it's basically like any recruiting tool with that little twist that it's mission focused.
I love it. I would have loved this when I was a freshman, sophomore in college, because all I wanted to do was find ways to serve. And it would have been brilliant to have had that, but the internet was kind of just coming around at that time. So
Yes.
we weren't quite ready for apps yet. We didn't even have cell phones.
I know what you mean. I would have loved to live a life where I hopped from one mission opportunity to another, that mission bohemian life sort of.
Oh, that would have been fun.
Right? Yes. So I'm very excited. I see myself either retiring or dying at this job because that's how much I love it. It's perfect for me.
My husband has always said that you need to have a job that even if you didn't get paid, you would do it.
Absolutely. This is it for me.
Purpose and passion make all the difference.
Absolutely.
So, Fylvia, let's talk a little bit about your life. How did you end up being the manager of VividFaith? Because often our stories start way back in our childhood. So tell me a little bit about your childhood years, your mother, your father, where you were raised.
Boy, I don't know if you have enough time for that. But,
we do. We have our water and we're good to go.
My grandfather on my mother's side was an Adventist, and she was brought up Adventist. And, my dad, he was the first Adventist in his family. Many similar stories like mine start out in such a home. So nothing extraordinary about that. I was way ahead in my school years, so I ended up taking a degree, I think just to be in school, But God had other plans. I've never used my degree. I have a master's in English literature with a minor in linguistics. Never used it. And if you look at my career, my resume, you would think I was schizophrenic because I have done all kinds of things. But oddly enough, every job I've held, I've never applied to myself. And I'm sure others share the similar experience. And God just led me to these jobs, and it happened. Oftentimes, one job wasn't connected to another. For example, I've been a high school principal for a few years. I was the assistant director for stewardship for the GC many moons ago. I've managed a studio actually right here on this level, just down the hallway.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so none of these jobs are connected. I have had no career ladder that made sense. But where I am today makes sense of it all. All the things I've done that's disconnected, seemingly disconnected.
I find that seems to be an overarching theme with almost everybody who I talk to, is that I like to call them like these Midian years, where it's just like all these things where God is like curating and cultivating these incredible gifts and talents within us that end up bringing us to this place where we feel great fulfillment and purpose. Yeah. And we have felt that along the way, but we didn't realize how he's beautifully crafting these. So where did you grow up?
I was born in India.
Okay.
And then when my parents, like most Adventists, traveled to Andrews University to get a degree, I was just a kid, traveled with them, and then went back to India and then came back to the U.S. So I've straddled both countries in my growing up and my adult years. So I think of myself as Indian. I think of myself as American, somewhere there.
You're somewhere in there.
Someone asked me, what's your ethnicity? What's your nationality? How do you identify yourself? And I told them, the best way to identify myself is I'm Adventist before I'm Indian or American or anything else. Because where you're from, you've got cultural ties, language ties, your heritage. And if I look at culture, language, heritage, I speak the Adventist lingo that everybody, that within our community, we understand the phrases, the context. My culture is Adventist before it's anything else. So who I am is really Adventist before I'm anything else.
So when you were growing up in India, you grew up Adventist.
Yes.
Were you a part of like Pathfinders and like all those kind of things?
Absolutely. That's part of being Adventist.
Okay,
yeah, that's why I'm Adventist. But we grew up in a typical Adventist campus in India that was so enclosed.
Which campus was that?
The Southern Asia Division. Back then, the campus was in Pune.
Mm-hmm.
Town is called Pune now, and it literally had a fence around us. No one comes in, and when we go out, it's just for something specific, like shopping. So it was a very, I wouldn't say cultish, but
it's an Adventist bubble.
It's
for
an
sure.
Adventist bubble of some sort, a community. Wonderful. I would not have chosen another childhood, but it was insulated from any other influences outside. So that's why I say I'm more Adventist than I'm Indian, because if you ask me, about certain festivals or traditions in India, I don't know. Not because I grew up part of my time in the U.S. It's because I've always been in an Adventist bubble. So I think in a way that was nice, a very safe growing up, but also a disadvantage because I don't think I truly understood other people until my adult years.
Yeah, I do. And that is it's the gift of the bubble and kind of the curse of the bubble all at the same time.
Yeah.
And it's like you wouldn't trade it in because you love the idea of having had that safety.
Yes. And even now as an Indian, I have to sometimes Google things that are specifically Indian or outside of the Christian traditions in India. I Google it because I didn't grow up participating in those things because I was in the bubble.
So your parents were on this campus. Does that mean that your parents were employed by the church?
Yes.
What did your parents do?
So my mom was the vice principal of a school there, and my dad was the editor of the magazine for the Southern Asia Division for a long time, for the press, actually, several magazines. And then later on, he was an officer at the division office. And the other peculiarity of that bubble was that at the division campus, there were people from all parts of India that worked there. So the common language was always English. So, and so we grew up speaking English to one another. And again, it was like a blessing, and it was also a bit of a curse because we never really had an opportunity to learn the language of our family, because in school we spoke English, and everybody, all the families, at least the children,
mm-hmm. So your father went to Andrews to pursue master's or a doctorate, I'm guessing.
Yeah, he made 2 trips there. The first one was when I was a child. I was, I think, about 3 years old. And back then, when the division would sponsor an employee, the family didn't accompany the person. So,
oh, wow.
Yes. So my dad left my mom and me in my grandparents' house. Actually, he left them in my uncle's home, but I was a terrible child. And the way the story goes, I was abusive to my cousin and even bit him till he bled. So,
oh, ouch.
So
you're like one of these like really super sweet people that I know in the building. It's like, that just sounds so funny. That
I think I've been reborn.
Well, that's excellent. That was the conversion experience.
Yes, the conversion. So my mom took me and fled to my grandparents' home, which was not in an urban area. So
where did they live?
They lived in a little village by the Arabian Sea. And that's another story in itself. My grandfather felt called by the Holy Spirit to give up a home in a city where he could have been a pastor. He kept his pastoral job, but he lived in this little village because he felt called to minister to the people in this village. It was so back in the beachy areas without utilities, but he built a home and he lived there till he died. But that's another story. But anyway, that's where we were for 3 years when my dad went to Syracuse University, which is also a little bit of an anomaly when employees these days, when you're sponsored, you usually go to a church institution. He did his journalism degree at Syracuse.
I grew up in Syracuse area.
Yeah, my daughter went to Syracuse too
okay.
later on because Grandpa went there. And then he did his second master's at Andrews. So by the time he returned, I was 5, 6 years old and didn't know who the strange man was and had to get acquainted with my dad at that age. But that's when. And then the second time when he went to Andrews to pursue his doctorate, we accompanied him. Yeah.
Okay. And how old were you about that time?
11.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you move over to America, and for the rest of this time, you've pretty much either been kind of like with your grandparents or on the campus.
Yeah, the first time he returned when I was 5, and then we moved to the campus where I grew up, and I told the bubble. And then when I was 11, we came back to the US.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now, because I don't know much about Pune and that area of India, I mean, I know where it is on a map.
Yeah.
Do you guys get like snow there?
No.
Okay. Does it get really cold there?
Yeah. Not very cold, but cold enough to call it cold.
So Andrews, though, was a bit of a shock.
Yes. Yes, it was. I was bundled up, to catch the school bus. And I remember one day I was all bundled up, but when I returned home, my earlobe had frostbite.
Oh, no.
So to this day, I got one fat one and one normal one. But yes, it was that cold.
Wow. So what was that like? Moving to America culturally, just like the whole.
I didn't feel it. This 11-year-old, I felt like I moved from one Adventist bubble to another Adventist bubble, because Andrews University, it's a very multicultural campus. In our apartment building, there was people from all over the world. I didn't feel out of place because I was Adventist and I'm moving into another Adventist community, and somehow that identity of being Adventist kind of transfers from one place to another. And I felt that connection all my life. I've never really, I feel at home as long as I'm in that community that nurtures me, that supports me, that I can identify with, So no, I didn't feel any cultural shock or anything like that.
And English was the language you were speaking there, so it wasn't even a complication with like the coming over here and not knowing the languages, and that's a huge blessing.
Yes.
If you when you consider that transition was made easier for you because of that. Now, did you go to an Adventist school up in Andrews?
No, I went to the public school there.
And how many years were you in the Andrews area?
3 years. Yeah.
So that's just about to start high school years. So now you're about ready to start high school. Do you go back?
I go back to India. But what I got really accustomed to in the US was the ability to go to school and wear anything you wanted to wear. You didn't have a uniform, and I loved that. And for some reason, I forgot that when I go back home to India, I have to get back into the habit of wearing uniforms. And somehow, as a teenager, the idea of wearing a uniform again just bothered me so much, more than it should have. Call it vanity, call it whatever, but it bothered me so much. So I had graduated from 10th grade, not graduated, but completed 10th grade in Michigan. And the idea of sitting through 11th and 12th wearing a uniform was really tough. So I went home. I told my mom, I'm just going to take a year off, learn to sew better, learn to crochet, find myself, whatever.
Find yourself.
I can't remember what all I told my mom, but they knew that was a little difficult for me. And then I didn't have any friends.
It was actually a harder transition going back to India, which is where you were raised, than coming to America.
Because Yeah, because I didn't have friends. That was my, and that seemed to important at that stage in my life as a teenager.
No, it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
Actually, our friends are some of the most influential, people in our lives during those teen years. It's less the parents and it is more of our friends.
So that was the problem there. But then I decided to just, teach myself all that I needed to teach, all that I needed to learn, 11th and 12th. And I challenged the exam over there and just skipped a little bit. And
so you didn't actually go back to school? I love this, actually. So basically, like in America, we have like the GED. So was it kind of something like that? So you basically studied and learned everything you needed to know.
Yeah, and I did. And then they have a sort of 11th and 12th there, but it's after high school. So what I had to do was go back and take a year and a half or two to complete high school, and then go into it's like an associate degree that you take before you go into college. 11th, 12th, they call it. Oh, I don't even know what they call it. Anyway, it's okay. Something. So I that's what I did. I just skipped the years that would require uniform, basically. That's as
Fylvia,
ridiculous as it was.
I'm actually madly in love with this whole entire story. It may be actually my favorite story I've heard so far on any interview. Someone skipping the school years and teaching themselves so they do not have to wear a uniform.
Yes, that's just kind of my personality. Years later, when we returned from missions, years later, there was we needed to buy a car, right? And the only car on sale was a stick shift, and I didn't know how to ride a stick shift. And my husband said he'd teach me, but we couldn't find a job in the same place. Come back, and the GC was not hiring at that time, so we were stuck on the West Coast, couldn't find a job. So he ends up moving the next state over in California. I stayed in Oregon, so we were separated by choice for 2 years. We worked in separate. And so I was stuck with this car, the stick shift, and he wasn't around to teach me. So I went to YouTube and I watched. I took screenshots and stuck it on my dashboard. So he gave me 1 or 2 lessons, and then I just off I went. So that's kind of my personality. If I find something that's stopping me, I just kind of find a way to cross that hurdle and move on.
I knew I liked you, but now I know why I like you. This is fabulous. So, okay. You've gotten through the uniform protest.
Yes.
I'm going to call it the uniform protest at this point. And you go into college?
Yeah, it was those. Yeah.
Okay.
It was like a pre-med, kind of a 2-year associate degree that you do if you want to go into the sciences. So like here you do 4 years of pre-med. There it's like 2 years, and then you go into medicine or something like that.
Okay. So you were going to go into medicine.
Yeah. I mean, I should.
It's okay. We just had a generalization in the last.
Yes, this is a generalization. I think my parents would have preferred if I'd went to medicine. So let's put it that way.
I've interviewed Justin Kim, and he was saying that he actually went to school for medicine because that's what he was supposed to do too. And his parents were like, "Wait, the pay difference, right, between like what you're doing and
Same thing.
If those of you who are listening have not listened to Justin Kim's yet, you need to listen to it because you'll be able to resonate with Fylvia and Justin here. So where do you go to college? Is it the Adventist College there?
Mm-hmm. There's only
what is it
choice.
called?
It's called Spicer Memorial College.
Okay, where is this located?
In Pune, same place where I was.
So this Adventist bubble, we still have
still have that.
Our bubble here.
Yeah, and had I gone into medicine, it wouldn't have been an Adventist bubble. But again, I was just a kid. I'm choosing 5 years of medicine, then you've got fellowships and residency, blah blah blah, and 4 years of college. If I do all the summers, I can get it done in 3 1/4. I'm gonna do that. So yeah, I chose that.
All right. So you did get your medical?
No, I didn't. I chose the shorter, easier one to do.
Okay.
Yes.
Excellent. All right. So you finished your degree.
Yes.
And where do you go from here?
Well, I don't think I was still too young. I was 19, I think, when I finished college. And I'm thinking, what do I do now? I barely 20. I think it was a little over 19. So I decided to do my master's, and the church had a really good agreement with a private school. Maybe it was state. I don't know. Some school. It was the University of Pune right next door. Really, really good university. So I got in and I did my master's.
Your master's in?
And in literature.
Okay.
Linguistics. Yeah.
Literature and linguistics. What were you planning to do with literature and linguistics?
I don't know.
You didn't? I'm sorry. This is great. I love it.
I was just a kid. I had no plans, and I don't think I ever even paused and said, "Oh God, what do you want me to do?" Because I don't know. I'm in the bubble. The bubble dictates. You go. If you don't go to medicine, where the church had a good relationship with the medical school there, and they had a quota of certain people from a certain number of Adventists who could apply, and it was a done deal that way. Or I could go for the shorter, quicker college route, and that was kind of your only two options. So I never even thought of asking God what he wanted me to do, because I thought there were two options, A or B, both are just as good. I chose the easy one, and that was it.
Okay, so I love this. I mean,
I'm sorry, maybe this is not something you want to share.
No, this is actually, I pondered this when I was in high school trying to figure out what I was going to get my degree in originally. I was dead certain I was going to be a physical therapist. Okay, and then I found out you had to dissect a cadaver, and that was like a hard nix for me. But sometimes I actually think that we expect these basically teenagers to make life decisions that it's like a lot. Like if I had actually had to pick like what I was going to, like if I had gone into marketing or something, it wouldn't have even been social media. Like what I'm doing now isn't even what would have been a degree back then.
Yeah.
We're asking young people to make decisions that they're not really always equipped and ready to make. So I love your story because it's very honest. It's just kind of like, I'm doing it because this is what we're supposed to do.
Yeah. And if, in hindsight, I would have loved to just serve somewhere and figure out what my gifts are that God has blessed me with, what type of people do I want to serve? What needs do I want to serve, But sometimes life is so prescribed that we don't stop to challenge it, or you're just a kid and you actually like the prescribed way because it's the easy way. Most kids don't like to go to school, and I was no different. I just want to get it over with. But in hindsight, yes, I would love for every young person to have choices, to explore the path that God has for them, because God really wants you to explore, because you can't just assume you have gifts in you based on what you like to do. I've discovered in life that my strengths are not necessarily what I like to do, but if I am connected with God, those things that I'm good at become such a big blessing that eventually I love them. Yeah. And unfortunately, when I was young, I was just a kid.
Well, I think it also gives a lot of encouragement, your story, for young people who are trying to figure out what they want, but also for those of us who are a little bit older who we haven't quite figured it out. I mean, people can be 30s, 40s, 50s, and they're still trying to figure out what they're doing. And the fact that you have come to a place, as you've said earlier, where it's like God has taken all these skills and you're in a place where you just absolutely love it. Understanding that sometimes this journey for different people is going to just look so different, and maybe more like whitewater rapids, it's going to be thrilling, but kind of crazy all at the same time. Instead of these very typical trajectories, like, oh, I went to school for this, and then I did this, and then I did this. I love the idea that it's this crazy, beautiful journey that God takes us on, that we don't always understand it.
I was very fortunate. I consider myself very fortunate and very blessed to have at an early age realize the importance of trying to stop figuring it out. I learned that lesson early. Stop trying to figure out what is ahead of me, or why something happened in my present time. Stop trying to figure it out and just enjoy the ride. Because there's always enough blessings in the day to really enjoy the ride. So one of the things, one of the habits that defines who I am is when I learned this lesson. And I learned it when my first marriage, didn't work out. And I was very young. I was, mid-20s. And I spent so much time trying to figure out what went wrong and what I could have done differently. And in my searching, I don't know how it happened, but I had this epiphany that I think was God's voice telling me, quit trying to figure life out. And as soon as I realized that, my life changed. Since that day till today, I've had terrible, awful things happen to me that I cannot even talk to anyone about. But it has made no difference because I've stopped trying to figure it out. I'm going to enjoy the ride no matter what. And the habit that I developed at that point when I was 25, 26 was at the end of every day, not to close my eyes until I can think of 3 things that overwhelm me with joy and gratitude from that day. It's such a simple thing. It's such a simple concept. And now I don't know if I read it somewhere, or if it's a thought that God put in my head, or if it was just me being so desperate to make sense of that day. I don't know. But it's that simple habit. Never go to bed, never close your eyes until you can think of 3 things that overwhelms you with joy and gratitude. And that has made a difference. So whether I've used a degree or not, whether I squandered the chance to go to medical school, or plans turned upside down, or there was a time I was unemployed and budgeted literally $10 a day for food for a family of 4, whether it was the fact that it was somebody I thought even the losing of the job was an unfair treatment by a fellow church member. Even then, after that period of time was over, I think a couple of weeks I wallowed. But even when I wallowed in misery or anger or sense of, I need a soapbox to tell my side of the story, those times?
I do.
They're terrible. When you, especially when you know you're in the right, you want a soapbox to stand up. It's even harder when it's one of your own who's made life difficult, stand on a soapbox. But then I remember this habit, so I have to admit that during that first week, it was really, really hard to think of 3 things. But I forced myself. I wouldn't say those things brought me overwhelming joy, but maybe just a little droplet. But over time, I was able to get back in that place. Again, because I had to remind myself to stop trying to figure it out. People say, it's okay, eventually you'll know why things happen. I don't know about that. I really don't. I'm here almost the last, quarter century of my life, and there's so many things. I can't figure it out. It doesn't make sense. So why try to? It's all, maybe when you get to heaven, it makes sense. But on earth, it doesn't need to make sense. And that's what keeps me happy. I'm really content working for God's church. I'm content with the job I have, with the crazy life I have, the good and the bad, because I've stopped trying to figure it out.
I love that. Actually, I think I needed to talk with you today because I struggle with this. I want to make sense of things. I need to have some sort of order in my mind. I can handle some chaos as long as there's some order there, but I often am asking myself, but I don't get this. Like, why? You know, and I've had to learn this multiple times because I've had church hurt too. I think a lot of us have. And
they're people. They're just people.
They are.
Just like me. And it's possible we've hurt somebody along the way.
I almost hate calling it church hurt. It's accurate because we are the church.
Yes.
And so we are the ones doing the hurting or being hurt. But I also hate the fact that it almost sounds like the institution, because it's not often the institution. It's often the people. Sometimes it is the institution. I've had both. But the idea of just resting in him and just not trying to need to figure everything out. Not needing to have the soapbox, knowing that God can vindicate. It's challenging sometimes. And it doesn't mean that sometimes we shouldn't stand up, but sometimes we need to just rest in his promise.
It's why you want to stand up. If it's just for others to hear my side of the story, it's not important. Because my side of, so what do I get? Some vindication. So to stand in the soapbox, to just tell my side of the story, is not reason enough for wanting a soapbox. If I stand on a soapbox to defend my beliefs, defend God's hand in my life, then sure, I should speak. Otherwise, I should just zip up and let life happen.
So you finish your degree.
Mm-hmm.
I actually just feel like you preached a whole sermon to me, and I'm like, it's hard to get back to like the story because that was incredibly meaningful. I just want you to know that might be one of the most powerful things I've heard so far with all my interviews, and something I know I needed, and I'm pretty sure our listeners are going to be blessed by. You finish your degree. Do you get a job from here? Where do we go from?
Yeah, I got a job at the GC.
Immediately out of college?
And well, I had a child, so I stayed at home. But when I moved here, I was a single mom, and I got a job here. I tried several times. I said, God, I want my bubble. At that time in my life as a single mom,
felt safe.
I wanted my bubble. So for that reason, I remember getting a job in a senator's office at Capitol Hill, and I couldn't even go to that. Couldn't even think of pursuing it because I was insecure at that time for many reasons because of what I was going through personally. I just wanted my bubble. So I applied over and over again to so many jobs at the GC. I think I have a master's, I'll get it. But no, I didn't get anything. There was one person who asked me to take a personality test and said we were not compatible. Good thing. No. And then one day I was praying. I said, God, all these people at interviews I go to at the GC, they seem so serious, all of them, the dark suit and the white shirt. I said, God, can you send me somebody I'd feel comfortable with? Maybe khaki pants and, I don't know, a shirt without no tie and maybe, I don't know, maybe a ponytail too, God. Why not?
Wow, that's like really adventurous here.
And so I got an interview, I still had several. They were all duds, didn't get the job. And then finally I got one. So I walk into the GC and I'm sitting there, 27 years old at that time, and waiting for the person to come. And there's this guy says, I'm just sitting there praying, and he comes and he reaches out his hand and says, "Hi, Fylvia. I'm Dave Brillhart." I look at him. So khaki pants, blue shirt, no tie. I turn around to follow him. He turns around. I look at his head. He's got a ponytail, and I thought, "Wow, God, you are a God of the little things when a heart needs to see the little things." And that was my first experience at the GC, a man with a ponytail. I don't know if Dave's listening somewhere.
We're going to find him just so that he can know.
Yeah. So he was part of God's way of telling me, I got this. I got your back, And it was around that time, mid-20s, and about 2 years earlier, I had told God, I get it. I need to stop trying to figure it out. And every now and then, since that time, he drops a little something for me to create a memory and hold on to. And it's been great.
So now, did you get a job with Dave?
Yes, I did.
And what did you do? What was your first job in the GC?
He hired me as a secretary, and I was a terrible secretary because I'm dyslexic. So I used to get phone numbers wrong. I'd file everything incorrectly. And he probably wanted to fire me. And
who was Dave? I don't know him.
He was the director of media services.
All right, director of media services. Okay.
Before this, what you're doing here was part of the GC communication. It was a department by itself.
Okay.
So it was terrible. And so he told me, okay, why don't you just watch what we do as far as production? And then we can figure out what jobs. So he sent a memo to everybody, all the producers saying, let's stop using her as a secretary because it's not working. It's not working out. So he asked me to log tapes, watch production, see if I could write scripts. And then he saw that I was talented in those areas. So I did a little script writing, was a production assistant, I logged tapes. I did a little bit of everything. And I was in my element. I loved it. But it was grace on his part to not fire me for not being able to do the job. But
this is like the best. I'm loving this story. It
was wonderful to me. First of all, he was an answer to my prayers. And then he showed me grace. It was wonderful.
I love how God does that for us. Where he shows up when we need him to show up.
Absolutely.
Down to the littlest details. Like he could have just sent you a guy who was wearing khakis. But no, it's the littlest details down to the ponytail and
I was
everything.
just kidding with the God, I truly didn't expect anybody with a ponytail to be working in the General Conference in, 1991, that's 91, 92, whatever it was. But there he was. Yeah. So
you serve for this Office of Media Services and become a production assistant. And you're starting to learn all these new amazing talents and gifts that God has given you that you might not have known otherwise.
Absolutely. Would never have known.
So how many years do you work in this role?
Oh, boy. I don't know. After a while, David left the GC and they made me the media center manager. Sent me to Simi Valley, media center there for some training.
Well, now
came back, but I can't remember how many years it was.
Now, there's going to be people who do not know what Simi Valley means.
Yes.
So
there was the Adventist Media Center was there, the Adventist Media Center for the church and North American Division.
So what was in there?
It was the studio where all the shows, It Is Written,
Faith for
Today, Voice of Prophecy, I think, and
I think It Is Written was out there.
It Is Written, was it? I can't remember. But all those shows were produced there under one production house.
Okay, so just like this big production area. Yeah. So you get to go out there. You actually get to train and really learn this craft.
Wonderful. All these people, I had only read about. And there they were, treating me like this little kid who's come there for, it was just wonderful.
So what were you producing? What was the Office of Media Services? Yeah, here.
It was services that any department of the GC could use for any production. So that's what it was. It was a studio and services that we would offer GC departments, General Conference departments, and then later it was absorbed. While I was still there, it was absorbed into GC Communications.
Okay,
which is what it is now.
Which is what I work for.
Yeah, that's it.
But I don't get to do the things that you got to do. That sounds like a lot of fun. I think I would enjoy that.
Yeah,
actually.
We used to literally, our services were billable. So we would say, okay, for such and such a department, we used a crew of 3. We had X number of hours for editing. So we would show an actual cost of equivalent of the services we provided.
So after you get done serving as the manager of it, where do you go from there? It gets absorbed
and then absorbed, and then I moved to be the editorial assistant for the Adult Sabbath School Quarterly, Adult Bible Study Guide now it's called. Was there for a while, and then
Clifford Goldstein was here during that time, or who was it back then?
Urban Gain.
Urban Gain. Okay.
Yeah, it was a long time ago. I am that old. Yeah.
I'm not gonna call you old.
Oh, you can. I don't care. So it's okay. It is what it is. Yeah. So yeah, Urban Gain, and then from there, out of the blue, someone asked me if I'd be interested in being the assistant director of stewardship for the General Conference.
Now that's a little bit of a.
Yeah, I mean, I told you that's what happened out of the blue.
So I know you serve in this role. What
until then there were only ordained men who had gone to the seminary there. I really don't know how that came to be. Somebody asked, and I've always explored whatever comes my way. So they said, would you be interested? I said, oh, well, why not? Let me look into it. And so yeah, I did that. But spoiler alert.
Oh, I love spoilers.
You know, I jumped from editorial assistant to assistant director of stewardship.
Yes.
That's a huge jump. Right?
That it is. For people who don't understand the structure, an editorial assistant is, I don't want to say it. They're kind of like the secretaries,
this
kind
is
of
managerial,
yeah.
all of a sudden, and it's a different field. And
you become a traveler.
Yeah, and I'd never been to the seminary. You know, I was the first woman to have that job. It was a different, but you know something? All that I had learned to practice gratitude and everything, it to me it seemed like, hey, paid off. wrong perspective. Absolutely wrong perspective. I enjoyed the job. I was doing really well, but if I have to be completely honest, Alyssa, I was a little full of myself. Maybe just a little bit. Full. Pride was somehow crept into my life at that point. Because I had this job that came to be, despite all odds, you know, I was an anomaly there. And I just a little bit. And it's a tough lesson. It's not like I lost my job or anything, because I did a really good job, I thought. Mm-hmm. Started a magazine that's still there today.
Dynamic Steward.
My
husband designs Dynamic Steward.
So that was what I started back then. So I know I did it. I produced, because of my media management background, I produced training videos on stewardship for Ben Maxon, who was the director then for the entire world church. Traveled, was great. God had his eye on me, and I'm glad he did, because maybe no one at the GC and no one in my family could see that pride had crept into my life. It took me a long time to realize that it was me. So what God said, okay, let's bring her down a peg or two. So it was my husband, who was a young Adventist then, not young in age, but you know, new
in faith,
and he was working in the private sector in the healthcare industry, doing really well. Somehow he got this idea in his head that we should go as missionaries. And to me, it seemed like the worst time possible to go, because I was at this job that was really good. And I was telling myself that I was going to go places. And I think if pride hadn't gotten in the way, probably I would have. And then my children were in places in their life where they wouldn't get what they needed scholastically if we had gone. And I was open to going as a missionary if it was maybe, you know, some fancy place like London or Singapore or, you know, a developed country or something like that. But
Tahiti. I was always willing to go to Tahiti.
Right? But no, you get it called to Nepal. And being from India, I always grew up saying Nepal is to the north of us and 70 years behind us. So I'm thinking, I don't want to go there. But Roy was convicted. And just last Sabbath, in fact, I was preaching in my home church. I shared this incident of how God nipped my wings, so to speak. And so Roy wanted to go, and he was ready to go. And, you know, I didn't want to. So I said no to God. And he showed me many signs which I could have taken as, yes, you should go. I said, no, I won't go. And he even came down to a double rainbow. I said, okay, fine. Show me a double rainbow. Whoosh, double rainbow. And I said, no. Coincidence. I'm not going. And then one day I was at a church where I wasn't supposed to be visiting. And so it was just happenstance. And the preacher says, when God calls you to go, you should go without your questions answered. Just go. And Roy was with me, and he kind of digs into my ribs really hard. And he said, I just moved away. No, not going. So I was so stubborn that somehow my husband, and again, I mentioned this to my church congregation, it was the first and only time where he took a decision without consulting me. So one Sabbath afternoon, I was sleeping. I woke up. We were in this hotel room in Atlanta, and he's doing emails. I says, what'd you do? What are you doing? He says, well, I just accepted the call.
Oh my, I'm just going to say, as a wife, I'm not sure I would do well with that.
I was mad. He said to me, it's what God wants us to do, and you are not listening. So I took the decision for us. I was really mad. And then he had also said, I also ordered Chinese for you, because he knows maybe he thought that would pacify me. But no matter how mad I am.
Does Chinese pacify you normally? Yeah. I'm going to remember that. Note to self, if I ever need to pacify Fylvia, get Chinese.
So even though I was mad, I said, okay, fine, I'll eat my Chinese food. So I'm eating, not talking to him though. I'm looking the other way and eating my Chinese food. I don't say no to fortune cookies too. So I take my fortune cookie, open it up, and it says, you will go to a faraway place. So
I'm sorry, that's great.
So I could not argue with a fortune cookie. And so I went 6 years in Nepal. It was what God needed me to do, and it was what I needed from God. Because during those 6 years, my spiritual life grew to a point where maybe I sound like a pompous Christian, but I don't think there's anything, hands down, anything that can shake my faith after my experience in Nepal. I may freak out a little bit, might get scared, but last day events, doesn't bother me. Something terrible happening with tragedy, someone I love dying, sure, I'll be sad. Doesn't bother me, because I grew in God to a place of faith that I know will never be shaken. I have that confidence. I know it makes me sound like I'm, full of myself, but I say that in all humility. What I learned walking with God in the 6 years I served in the mission field, in the 6 years I served doing something that I felt I didn't even have the skills to do. I didn't have a job description. I did whatever was needed that day. I didn't have a title that made me feel good. But those 6 years made me God's child, 100%.
I don't think it makes you sound pompous in the slightest. What I see is, again, it's like those Midian years. It's like God has to call you. Like Moses has this time, where God needed to place him somewhere where he learned to rely on God. And what a privilege it was that you chose through all those life experiences that brought you there before that, and that you could just fully put yourself into him while you were there.
Yeah. I'm glad my stubbornness ended and my reliance on God began then.
What did you do in Nepal? It's very interesting. Fylvia, I feel like after this, you and I just need to go and sit down and get Chinese. Because there's so many things that are in your life that mirror mine. And from fortune cookies that tell me something, which is exactly before I got my job at the GC, a fortune cookie told me something. Nepal has always been the country of my heart.
Oh.
When I was 12, I wanted to be a missionary to Nepal. If someone tells me that they're going to be a missionary to Nepal, I'm pretty much like, open my purse. I will give you all the money I have. Do take my credit card. there's just so much that's resonating with your story. So I want to know what you did in Nepal, because it's where I've always wanted to go.
Roy gave me this title, Director of Special Projects, which really meant do what no one else can do or no one else wants to do.
What did Roy do there?
He was the hospital administrator. He was the CEO of the hospital.
Okay,
there.
The hospital there is
Sheer Memorial Hospital.
Okay.
And although I resisted at first, the moment I gave in and to do whatever was needed, God and I together created amazing initiatives there. We created so many things. There's probably not enough time to even share. We ideas would come to me that I know was heaven sent. There's no other explanation. I mean, I think I have one or two creative bones in my body, but not all of them are that way. And it was an amazing experience. Everything from organizing the first internationally sanctioned marathon in the country, which included me getting Toyota as the sponsor, and the president of Toyota coming from Japan.
Wow.
And the marathon being the marathon had runners rep from 32 different countries in this small country there, done with this small hospital, a team of me and a few others. We pulled it off. It was on the cover of Adventist Review later on, to creating satellite clinics that were built in partnership with the local villages, finding cost-effective ways to give medical care to people without any medical care within a radius of 1 hour of walking distance. Right? Partnering with non-Adventist organizations to provide care. And my husband and I together, we experience miracles almost every day, and all because we relied on God to show us what to do, and then to show us how to do it. It was I could go on and on about all the things that happened in Nepal.
So you come back from Nepal,
Mm-hmm.
obviously a changed person.
Mm-hmm.
What job do you come back to?
Everyone who leaves as a missionary from the GC, usually when they come back, the church finds a job for them. When we came back, there was no job for us. There was nothing here at the GC. And it was just a couple of years before the recession, so with good reason. There just wasn't
anything.
We asked, there was no job. And when you leave as a missionary, you sign a paper saying, I understand that when I come back, the church is not obligated to give me a job. And we understood that. So Maryland is our home. We came here, but there was no job. So that's when we went looking for a job. And I found one as a high school principal in Oregon, and Roy found one in the private healthcare sector in California. So I had the kids.
What high school were you at?
Rogue Valley Adventist High School.
Okay.
Yeah. So we spent 2 years apart, which was tough. After working together, under the same roof, the same office, the same shared goals, working together as partners for 6 years, and then suddenly to be apart for 2 years, it was tough. But then after that, I found an opportunity to be the vice president of a chamber of commerce, which came my way, and I thought, wow, that is so disconnected, because I've never worked outside the church. And it was one of the largest chambers of commerce in the country. So, okay, God. So I did that for a few years, which taught me so much about small business startups, about networking, about working with non-Adventists, and all those skills that I use today. And after that, I was unemployed for a bit. Strange set of events. Actually, that was before the Chamber of Commerce. And one day, someone was driving the elevator with my dad here at the GC. My dad was working here, and said, "Oh, aren't you Fylvia's dad?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "Where is Fylvia these days?" And they said, "Oh, my dad says in Oregon." "Does she have a job?" He says, "She's looking for one." "Huh. Okay." Next thing I know, I was asked if I'd want to interview at a job. So after 12 years being away from the GC, God brought me
So
back
who called
here.
you?
It was Hope Channel. It was Darius Krause. Yeah. He was the VP there at Hope Channel at that time, and ran into my dad and asked about me, and then reached out, and it just happened.
So you come back here
Mm-hmm.
with Roy, and you serve at Hope Channel.
Mm-hmm.
And what were you doing for Hope Channel?
I was the director of marketing there.
Okay.
So skills I learned at the Chamber of Commerce, which I
Everything
never
just
thought I
coming
would.
in handy again.
And I used to freelance in marketing too. I had good clientele. I had Discovery Channel. I had some U.S. senators. I've always freelanced since I was, I don't know, like mid-20s. Always done something on the side. And so I had that background as well, communication and marketing for my private clientele. So it translated really well. And I came here. I was with Hope Channel for about 5 years. Yeah.
And then
Italo, who's the developer of the systems architect for VividFaith, was looking for a project manager because VividFaith was being developed then. So I just needed a change of pace. I needed to slow down a little bit. I had some health challenges. So I left the high-paced job at Hope Channel and took something that was more appropriate for my time right then with my health challenges. And that's how I became the project manager. Worked there for a few months, and GC Secretary says, hey, VividFaith is going to launch pretty soon. Would you like to be the manager? And I said, sure. So here I am.
So here you are.
Here I am.
That is, I think the idea of it being like a whitewater rapid, that to me explains your life journey beautifully. It's exhilarating, maybe sometimes a little terrifying, but you always have this, there's an end goal. God's taking us on it. We don't always know.
Don't know.
So now here you are. You work for VividFaith, and you help match people with mission opportunities. You've been able to serve as a missionary, which if you had never served, you might not fully understand the privilege of the service.
That's true. So my goal right now, I see, the church has been telling the church's initiative, I will go. It has produced great fruit. Everybody's ready to go. I mean, there are thousands ready to go. VividFaith, even without advertising, we grow our potential volunteers by an average of 200 a week.
Oh, wow.
So I have close to 6,000 people saying, I will go, I'm ready to go. But we need more opportunities for them. So we need to tell them where to go. Well, that didn't come
We need to tell them where to go.
And you know what? We need places for them to serve.
Actually, the biggest challenge is finding locations to have people serve.
Yeah, we need more opportunities for people to serve. The people are many, ready to go. This whole initiative, helping people understand their role in our church, our individual role to share our faith through acts of service. We're doing a great job of that. Lots of young people, retirees, in between, looking every day, literally 200 new people without any advertising. But there are not enough opportunities. So organizations need to find ways to create opportunities, welcome their doors to host volunteers and contract, or just anyone who wants to serve. So that's my burden right now. I'm trying to find ways to create opportunities so no one is disappointed. When the Holy Spirit talks to somebody, tells you, Alyssa, go, and you say, I will go, the Holy Spirit plants in you a heart to go and serve, a compassionate heart to serve. The Holy Spirit doesn't say, well, go to Nepal specifically. He says, go. So if you have that yearning to go and your church cannot find a place, you will go somewhere else. Maybe you'll go to Red Cross, mm-hmm. or to your local homeless shelter. You want to serve humanity. You want to find a place where you can share your faith. So people are not going to wait for us to create opportunities. we as a church need to find places for them to go so they become part of us, so that we can nurture that passion they have in their heart, and groom and nurture future leaders. So we need more opportunities out there. We need to create more opportunities so no one's disappointed when they say, I will go.
Fylvia, this whole entire talk with you has been wonderful. I feel like I've been changed. I mean, the whole purpose of this podcast is to inspire people by hearing leaders' stories. And I get the privilege of sitting across from each of these leaders. And today I can tell you, I am leaving. And if I had to count 3 things at the end of the night, this podcast would be one of them. You've changed my life. This has changed who I am as a leader, changed who I am as a person. Your life journey is incredible. And I am so grateful that you kept saying, I will go, basically, to God. No matter where it looked, you didn't need to know the end from the beginning. You could just totally go forward. And it's so inspiring to me. And I just want to thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day, trying to find mission opportunities for people to sit with me and to be able to share your story with the World Church and anyone who is listening.
Well, thank you, Alyssa. I didn't know where this conversation would go either. God used us both, and I'm so grateful for that too.
That's kind of the fun thing about this podcast is you guys just kind of know you're coming to tell your life story, and I don't know often anything ahead of time. I choose to try not to, because I love to be able to just explore your life story with you. 2 friends over a cup of water.
Yeah, I got to do better than this, actually.
I mean, I got to be fair. I what else am I going to put in here? But it is water. It does have your letter of your name on it. So I mean, I'm just saying, got my A. Anyways, we hope that you enjoyed this episode of Anon Profiles with Fylvia. If you haven't already, please take a moment to subscribe to our podcast or our YouTube channel or wherever it is that you're tuning in from today, because you do not want to miss any future episodes. Thank you for spending this time with us, and join us next week as I continue to get to know the life stories of more inspiring people.